high call series.
Okay, children, we have seen the lesson part on Greenland, the land of ice and snow. And now it is time for us to do the activity part of this particular lesson, right? So the activities start with the true or false question. So 5 sentences are given here and we need to read these sentences, check with what we have learned in the lesson, and based on what we have learned in the lesson, we need to identify whether these statements are true or false, right? So if the statement here agrees the same with what we have learned in the lesson, then it is a true statement. If it doesn't agree with what we have learned in the lesson, then it is a false statement, right? Okay, so the first one, Greenland has a polar climate. Greenland has a polar climate. So Greenland lies in the polar circle, right? In the North Polar region. So the climate there is a polar climate is what we have learned in the lesson, isn't it? Yes. So what the answer? It's a true. The answer is a true. Second, kayak is a small boat used by Eskimos for traveling. A single man paddleable boat in which they travel. Isn't it? That is called a kayak. So the answer is true again. Okay. So the small boats in which only one person can sit and row is called a kayak. Blubber of a sea animal is used as a fuel. We have seen that the animals like a seal, whales are killed basically for the thick layer of fat under the skin called a blubber. And this is what they use as a fuel, right? So blubber of sea animals is used as the fuel is a true statement. Eskimos are now known as Greenlanders. Eskimos are now known as Greenlanders. Their Inuits are known as Greenlanders, isn't it? Yes, so the answer is a false here. Huskies are wolf-like dogs. The huge dogs which are used for pulling the sleighs, right? They are huskies. So they are wolf-like dogs, huge dogs. It's a true statement, right? So Greenland has a polar climate is a true statement. Kayak is a small body used by Eskimos for traveling is also true. Blubber of a sea animal is used as a fuel is a true one. Eskimos are now known as Greenlanders is a false one. And huskies are wolf-like dogs is a true one. So shall we check it with the answers? Yes. Greenland has a polar climate. True. Kayak is a small body used by Eskimos for traveling. Blubber of a sea animal is used as a fuel. True. Eskimos are now known as Greenlanders is false. Huskies are wolf-like dogs again a true statement, right? Okay. So now I will keep the screen the same for another minute for you so that you can read the sentences once again and check which one, why these false statements have gone wrong, right? Yes. The second one is a fill in the blanks. 5 statements are given here. Every statement has a blank in it, right? And yes, we need to find a word with which we can fill these blanks. And where can we find the words? Yes, we have read the lesson, isn't it? So based on what we have learned in the lesson, we need to fill this, right? So the first one, Dash is the largest island of the world. Which one is the largest island of the world? Greenland is the largest island on the world, isn't it? Greenland is the largest island on the world. Second, Greenland is under the control of which country? Greenland is actually controlled by Denmark, isn't it? We have seen it in 1389. They conquered it. Huh? Yes. Third one, Greenland is also called the land of midnight sun. So Greenland is called the land of midnight sun because during the summer, even during the night time, they can see sun over there. Okay, during the summer season, even during the night time, they can see sun slightly. Okay, so that is why it is called the midnight sun. The sledges are pulled by, in the olden days, reindeers were used for pulling the sledges, and now huskies, the dogs, are also used for pulling the sledges, isn't it? So the sledges are pulled by huskies. Dash is the capital of Greenland. Nuuk is the capital of Greenland. Okay. So Greenland is the largest island of the world. Greenland is under the control of Denmark. Then Greenland is also known as the land of midnight sun. The sledges are pulled by huskies. Nuuk is the capital of Greenland. So shall we check the answers once? Yes. Greenland is the largest island on the world. Greenland is under the control of Denmark. Greenland is also called the land of midnight sun. The sledges are pulled by huskies. Nuuk is the capital of Greenland. Right? So now I will keep the screen the same for another minute so that you can read the complete sentences once again. Okay? So, parka. So, what is parka? When we said about the igloos, they wear a furry hooded cloth, isn't it? A jacket. That was called a parka. So, where is that? A hooded jacket. So, parka is a hooded jacket worn by the Eskimos. Now, Inuit. Inuit is the native of Greenland. Inuit is a native tribal groups who live in the Greenland region. Inuit is a native of Greenland. Kayak. Kayak is a one-man boat. A small boat which can be ridden by one single person. Only one person can sit in that and he has to row it. Okay, such a small boats are called a kayak. Nuuk. Nuuk is the capital city of Greenland. Arctic tern. Arctic tern is a migratory bird which migrates from the North Pole to the South Pole during the winter season. Right? So, parka is a hooded jacket, C. Inuit is a native of Greenland, E. Kayak is a one-man boat, D. Nuuk is a capital city of Greenland, B. And Arctic tern is a migratory bird, A. Right? So, shall we check the answers once? Okay. So, see, parka is a C, the hooded jacket that is worn by the Eskimos. Inuit. Inuit is a native of Greenland. Kayak, D, a one-man boat. Nuuk, the capital city of Greenland. Arctic tern, a migratory bird. Okay. So, once again, see, parka, C, a hooded jacket. Inuit, E, the native of Greenland. Kayak, D, a one-man boat. Nuuk, B, the capital of Greenland. Arctic tern, a migratory bird. Right? So now I will keep the screen the same for another minute so that you can match them once again. Right? Write one word for the following. So here we have got 6 descriptions. So we need to read these descriptions thoroughly and find the word which represent those descriptions, right? And we need to identify those words. So a modern motorized sledge. So what do we call the modern motorized sledge? So in the lesson we have seen that now latest motorized sledges are also made available there, which has got a bike like a handle and the ski wheels with hooked chains which can use as a brakes and all. So what was that called? Skidoo, isn't it? Skidoo, skidoo. So skidoo is the modern motorized sledges used in Greenland. Then a spear with a long leather rope. So in the olden days, the Inuks, the primitive people, they used to hunt animals with a long stick with an arrow kind of edge and which has a long leather rope. So they can simply throw this and by pulling the rope, they can get the animals out. So what was these kinds of weapons called? Harpoon. Harpoon. Harpoon, right? So the long spear with a long leather rope is called a harpoon. National sports of Greenland. So we have discussed this also in the lesson. They love playing football. So football is the national sports of Greenland and they play it on the ice fields, right? The house built with the ice blocks. The huge ice blocks, ice cubes are cut into blocks and one above the other they keep these blocks together and make a dome kind of a house. What do we call that? Igloo, right? So the house built with ice blocks are called a igloo, right? Now the floating blocks of ice. We have seen in the lesson along the coast of Arctic Ocean, the huge ice ice caps on the land area, they can cave, they can break into pieces, fall onto this Arctic Ocean and they move and they flow into the Atlantic Ocean. Huge ice masses that float in the Atlantic Ocean. What do we call them? Yeah, they are very severe threat as far as the ships are concerned in the Atlantic Ocean. We said about Titanic. So what is that? A huge mass of ice that float in the Arctic Ocean or Antarctic Ocean called an iceberg. What is that? Iceberg. Right. The wheelless cart for conveying loads or passengers over snow or ice. Sledge. There are two pole kind of structures with the loads and the chairs on which the people can sit, pulled by either reindeer or huskies. They are called sledges. They do not have any wheels. Right? So, shall we check the answer once? The modern motorized sledges are called a skidoo. The spear with a long leather rope is called a harpoon. The national sports of Greenland is a football. The house built with ice block is called a igloo. The floating block of ice is called a iceberg. A wheelless cart for conveying loads or passengers over snow or ice is called a sledge. Clear? So modern motorized sledges are called a skidoo. The spear with a long leather rope is called a harpoon. The national sports of Greenland is called football. The house built with ice blocks is called igloo. The floating blocks of ice are called icebergs. And a wheelless cart for conveying loads and passengers over snow or ice is called a sledge. Right? Okay. Now, I'll keep the screen the same for another minute so that you can go through these sentences once again. Right? Correct the following statements. Eskimos means a real man. Greenland has plenty of rainfall. Greenland is rich in natural vegetation. Greenland is poor in animal life. Nuuk is a port town of Greenland. So these 5 statements are actually taken from the text, but they are wrong. Isn't it? All the 5 statements are wrong. So what should we do now? We should correct that and write it again. Right? So first sentence, Eskimos means a real man. Eskimos, Inuks are known as the real men. And Eskimos are called the eaters of a raw meat. Isn't it? Eaters of a raw meat. They do not cook meat before eating. Greenland has plenty of rainfall. Greenland has very little rainfall but plenty of snowfall. Isn't it? Yes. So Greenland has a very little rainfall but plenty of snowfall. Greenland is rich in natural vegetation. Impossible, isn't it? In some of the regions of Greenland, the ice cover is for something around 2 to 3 kilometers. The thickness of ice is 2 to 3 kilometers. In the previous chapter, we have seen that in the rainforest region, the maximum height those trees grow are 60 to 70 meters. Isn't it? Then how is it possible to have a rich natural vegetation there? During the summer season, at some regions, the ice melt and we can see the land over there and the small plants like lichens or grass. Maximum height is 15 centimeters, isn't it? So, Greenland is poor in natural vegetation, isn't it? Greenland is poor in natural vegetation because the land is covered with a thick layer of snow. Now, Greenland is poor in animal life. Again wrong. Why? Rich in animal life, isn't it? Plenty of animals are there. Different kinds of animals are there. Right? So, Greenland is rich in animal life. Nuuk is a port town of Greenland. It's not a port town, it's a capital. Isn't it? Or the biggest town. You can say the biggest town or the capital of Greenland. Right? So, Eskimos means a eater of raw meat. Greenland has very little rainfall. Greenland is poor in natural vegetation. Greenland is rich in animal life. Nuuk is a capital town or the best town. Biggest town of Greenland. Right? So, shall we check the answer once? Yes. Eskimos means eater of raw meat. Greenland has a very little rainfall. Greenland has a scarcity of natural vegetation, means very less poor in natural vegetation. Greenland is rich in animal life. Nuuk is the biggest town. It's also the capital town of Greenland. Right? So these 5 statements are wrong and these 5 statements are the right ones. When we correct these into right statements, we get this. Right? So now I'll keep this slide the same for another minute for you so that you can read these statements once again. Right? And some statements can be rectified in different ways. For example, Greenland has plenty of rainfall. So here we wrote it has very little rainfall. But the same sentence can be corrected like Greenland has plenty of snowfall, isn't it? So you can write such kind of answers in your notebook also, right? Now, answer the following question. So, we have got some question answers from this lesson. Okay, so we need to do that. Why are polar regions very cold? So, we learned that Greenland lies in the polar belt and the climatic conditions are also polar climatic conditions. It's very cold. So, why is it very cold? The polar regions are very far away from the equator. That is the first and foremost reason. Okay. So, as it is very far away from the equator, what happens? Therefore, they receive the very slanting rays of the sun even in summer. So, around the equator, we get a straight falling sun rays, but towards the pole, slanting sun rays, which is not at all heat. Which doesn't have much heat or which is not at all very hot. So, they are very cold regions. So, the reason is polar regions are very far away from the equator and where the sun rays fall in a slantings, not in a straight line, right? That is the reason. What are icebergs? Why are sailors afraid of them? What are icebergs? The very big floating piece of ice is called an iceberg. Okay, the huge ice pieces which get separated from the land falls into the ocean and floats in the ocean are called icebergs. If a ship hits an iceberg, it may wreck and sink because the iceberg is much bigger below the surface of the sea water than it appears on the surface. We have seen that in the picture also, isn't it? Isn't it? Yeah, the amount of ice of an iceberg that we can see above the water is very less, whereas below the water is very big. We cannot see that. So when a ship goes and hits this iceberg, the bottom part of the ship will be totally damaged by the huge mass of ice under the water. Right? And so the ships can wreck or sink. So the sailors are afraid of them. We cannot understand how much ice is there below the water. That is why the sailors are afraid of icebergs. So how is the climate of Greenland? The climate of Greenland is very cold throughout the year because it has polar climatic conditions. Right? So why are the polar regions very cold? The polar regions are very far away from the equator. Therefore, they receive the very slanting rays of sun even in summer. So, they are very cold. 2. What are icebergs? Why are sailors afraid of them? The very big floating piece of ice is called an iceberg. If a ship hits an iceberg, it may wreck and sink it because the iceberg is much bigger below the surface of the seawater than it appears on the surface. So, the sailors are afraid of that. How is the climate of Greenland? The climate of Greenland is very cold throughout the year. So, these are the first three questions in the set of question answers we have in this lesson. So, I will keep the screen the same for another minute so that we can read these questions once again before we go into the next set of questions, right? Okay. So now we have the second set of questions. Fourth question. Why is Greenland called the land of midnight sun? So in summers, the sun shines brightly all the 24 hours in most part, even at midnight. That is why Greenland is called the land of midnight sun. So we have already seen that the winters are long and during winters the polar region is kept away from the sunlight. Okay, away from the sun. So during summer season, the slanting rays of sun can be seen even during the midnight time. And that is why it is called the land of midnight sun. What are the main occupations of the people of the Greenland? Hunting, fishing, and fish exports are the major occupations of the people of Greenland. They hunt animals, fishing, and fish processing and exporting. Carrying the fish and exporting are the major occupations. How is the Eskimos' lifestyle changing? So towards the end of the lesson, we have seen that it's changing. Lifestyle is changing in Greenland. So how is it changing? Many of Eskimos have shifted to small towns. Now they have permanent houses with electricity. Primary schools, hospitals, shops, clubs have been established. They have begun to use rifles and motorized sledges called skidoo. So earlier we know that Eskimos were wandering communities. They wandered from one place to other, hunting food and all, isn't it? Now they have shifted to small towns. There are some small towns being established on different regions. They have permanent house. They do not live in the igloos anymore. Primary education, hospitals, shops, clubs, etc. are established. They have begun to use rifles. Earlier they used harpoons, isn't it? Now they are using rifles and motorized sledges like skidoos are also now used by them. Right? Okay. So why is Greenland called the land of midnight sun? In summers, the sun shines brightly all the 24 hours in most part, even at midnight. That is why Greenland is called the land of midnight sun. What are the main occupation of the people of the Greenland? Hunting, fishing, and fish exports are the major occupations of the people of Greenland. How is the Eskimos' lifestyle changing? Many of Eskimos have shifted to small towns. Now they have permanent houses with electricity. Primary schools, hospitals, shops, clubs have been established. They have begun to use rifles and motorized sledges like skidoos. Right? So now I will keep the screen the same for another minute. You can read these sentences, these question answers once again. Read it loud, read it thorough. Right? project or activity is the next one. Collect the pictures of the animals found in Greenland and paste them in your scrapbook. So we have seen that plenty of animals are seen there, like the reindeers are there, caribous are there, Arctic fox, then musk ox, Arctic jackals are seen there, then walrus, seals, whales, then Arctic hares are there, Arctic owls are there, plenty of animals are there, right? So here we have done it as an example. Yes, Arctic eagle, fox, then reindeer, Arctic hare, seal, musk ox, polar bear, caribou, seal, plenty of animals are there. Okay, so you can collect these pictures either from some newspapers or magazines, or you can Google it also. Okay. Second question and activity: on the basis of the reading of the lesson, make a project comparing the lifestyles of Eskimos of modern times with their primitive lifestyle in the following concepts. So how were they different in the food, in shelter, and occupation? So now we need to compare the Eskimos in the olden days to with that of the present days in the aspects of food. So what kind of food did they eat in the olden days? What kind of food do they eat now? Shelter. Where did they live in the olden days? Where do they live now? Occupation. What did they do in the olden days and what are they doing now? Right? Yes. See, food. The primitive lifestyle was a raw food. Means what? They hunt some animal, split it open, eat raw flesh as it is. Right? But now, yeah, there are some regions still where they eat raw food, but processed food also. Means what? Cooked food are also eaten by the people now. Shelter. In the olden days, there were only igloos. Right? There were no other settlements. Right? So in the olden days, they lived only in igloos, but now they have igloos and permanent settlements also. There are permanent houses also built by these people to live in that. Occupation in the olden days was mostly on hunting and fishing. There was no other occupation for the people, but nowadays they do hunting, fishing, fish processing, exporting, tourism, mining. Plenty of minerals are found there, so mining is an occupation. Agriculture also is an occupation. Okay, during the short summer period, when they get the land seed, they do some cultivations, right? So, food in the primitive lifestyle was a raw food. In the present day, they eat a raw food and processed food. Shelter, they lived in igloo in the olden days, and in the present day life, they live in igloos and permanent buildings. Occupation, in the primitive lifestyle was hunting and fishing, and now hunting, fishing, fish processing, exporting, tourism, mining, agriculture, etc. are done by the people over there. Okay. So now I will keep this screen the same for another minute for you so that you can go through the table once again, right? So that is what we have got about the Greenland. We have completed the lesson and the exercise part of this lesson. So in the next class, we will meet again with another lesson. So till then, stay home, stay safe. Bye.